How's it going, everybody? Bryan, Alvarez, and Dave Meltzer here, Wrestling Observer Radio. It is May 12, 2020, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Dave's on the road here tonight, so he's joining us via telephone. We got a lot of news to talk about here today, not the least of which is a big congratulations to Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Becky announced at the beginning of Raw tonight that she is pregnant, and they created a storyline where she said that she had talked to WWE officials, and the Money in the Bank ladder match was in fact for more than just a contract. It was for the belt itself. And because Asuka won, Asuka is the new WWE Raw Women's Champion, and they had a big hug. Becky's crying, cut this great promo. It was an awesome moment on Raw, and I guess we'll see where her career goes. She's out for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of shocking in a lot of ways. I mean, she's in the middle of a big run, longest reigning champion in a long, long time, and the most over champion in a long, long time. Actually, maybe ever, when it comes to that women's title, or one of the most of all time. Maybe the most. So it's kind of unexpected in a lot of ways, but there you go. I mean, congratulations to them, and it looks like Asuka and maybe Shayna Baszler's the direction. Just from watching the TV, it seemed like Shayna was getting a big push. No Nia Jax on the show, so it feels like the direction they're going. And I mean, it's a good wrestling direction, and Becky Lynch in the promo pretty much said that Asuka's the best wrestler in the company. She didn't even say male or female.
She actually said the best wrestler in the world.
Well, maybe she's better. I don't know. I best woman wrestler in the world.
No, best wrestler. Didn't even specify male or female.
Well, yeah. I could never go that far, but that's fine. It's a promo. But
there was hyperbole bookending this show. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a way that you could say that. I mean, even if you want to stretch it as much as you want to, there's really no way. I mean, she's one of the best women wrestlers in the world. I don't know that she's the best wrestler in the company. I mean, when she was in NXT, there were times I thought she was, but on main roster, I couldn't say that. But whatever, I mean, as far as of all the women wrestlers they have under contract, I would say her and Io Shirai are the two best. So, so I mean, it's good. Whatever.
So they did an interview with Becky for People magazine, and basically she said that around fall of last year, she realized that Seth Rollins was the man that she wanted to have children with. And she always wanted to have kids, didn't know if it was ever going to happen. Said around WrestleMania, it was around April, she said, she did a pregnancy test, and it came up negative. But she just had this feeling, and so she went and she got a digital pregnancy test, and she used the new test, and it said, pregnant! And she apparently used the first one incorrectly, but she's very, very happy about it, but she noted that it's very, very difficult, obviously, because for all of her life, it's been all about herself and her career, and now there's been a big change, so...
Yeah, it's huge. And then the question is that, after the child is born, then you have another big decision to make. Do you want to go and continue your career, or do you want to stay home? I mean, now it's not so bad. I mean, it's in the sense of, but who knows what it's going to be like in a year? I mean, this is something no one can predict, because number one, you don't know what your emotions are going to be like. Everyone's different. There's women who just want to get right back in their career, and there are women who don't. I would think that there's a good shot she'll want to get back, but everyone's different. And the schedule is, it depends on what the schedule is. If we're in the situation where it's just once a week, that's a different mentality than if it's a more arduous schedule. Or if she's a big enough star, and if they are back to a more arduous schedule, that she can have it arranged where she doesn't have a more arduous schedule. So there's a lot of different factors involved in what's going on, and that's not anything that's going to matter for probably about 10, 11 months, something like that, or longer. So, it would be maybe 10, 11 months or so. Maybe next year's WrestleMania would be the return if she wants to return. Actually, I could see that from a timing standpoint. But then there's a question of like getting in shape and things like that. Who knows? I mean, so many different factors.
So also on the show last night, they just absolutely randomly announced, Drew McIntyre in a promo, that there is now a brand-to-brand invitation, because every time they do this, there has to be some sort of new wacky phrase.
They have to have a new name. Yeah, I mean, it's like, if you look at it, last week when those ratings came in for both SmackDown and Raw, I mean, it was like, okay, they're going to make a change. I mean, it's a lock. The ratings dropped too hard. I mean, when you're at that level, so it's either get rid of the whatever, which I thought was a chance, and if that was the case, the problem is who you put in the spot, and realistically, that's not going to change anything because it's I mean, the problem is lack of continuity and long-term pushing and things like that, and that's a Vince issue. So the other one that you do is you add more talent to each roster by ending the brand extension or whatever you want to call it, and they've done that many times. In fact, every single time they've done this, at some point they've had to rescind it because the ratings have dropped. It's like every single time this has happened. And this probably would have happened anyway at some point. Might have been 6 months later or 9 months later, but they were going to do this because every time they do this, it always ends up back that way. And it usually solidifies the ratings. They usually don't drop from here. That doesn't mean that will happen this time because it's a very unique situation. But historically, it usually, usually I can't say it helps, but it does maybe lower the drop because you have more options of people to do, and you can do new matches.
And what a great option they've started with. The Drew McIntyre, Baron Corbin main event promised for Raw next week.
Well, it really isn't too bad because I'm pretty sure that Drew's just going to beat him. So for a first one, you just get like someone who's, you would want someone who's a heel on the other brand, who's a big enough star, but not the top heel. I mean, if it was going to lead to, like if they were going in the direction of Strowman, because like when they did it, I thought that, okay, what are the heels there? And it's kind of like you don't want to. Bray Wyatt's in the championship picture, so you don't really want Drew McIntyre to beat him. So you want a heel. You want a heel who's gotten some steam behind him, but also who you can beat on television without, like, starting to do ridiculous DQs and things like that. So now, if they do a ridiculous DQ, then obviously what I said makes no sense. But to me, Corbin actually makes sense for it. But the negative is again, it's a new match, so that's the guys. But realistically, it's Corbin, and how much of a ratings difference is Corbin going to make? And my gut is
zero,
none. Yeah. So you're doing it, but so it's the novelty of the new match. But number one, it's just I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and on SmackDown, the big one that they're sending over is Charlotte Flair, who's also on NXT. So that's kind of weird, but that's their choice for now. I mean, everyone will probably be over, at one point or another. The top stars in each brand will be going back and forth. We had Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss on Raw since they're the tag team champions. So they started a program there. So tonight's show had, it was a lot of new stuff, building up the next cycle of things. So in that sense, it wasn't the same mundane type of stuff, but yet at the same time, there wasn't really a lot. Really the whole show was just talking as much as they could about Becky Lynch being pregnant. Like, I think that they just wanted people to think that there's going to be more regarding that, because that was probably, it's like, ratings this week, but in the long run, it also is going to take Becky Lynch off of the show. So, in a sense, that should not help the ratings when we get like a week or two down the line, unless they use her in a storyline, which I don't know. I don't know if she's not going to wrestle. I don't think that it's a good idea. I think she should just disappear for 10 months or whatever, or however long it's going to be.
Well, they did open with a Money in the Bank recap where they alerted us that Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black are in fact not dead. They dodged a serious bullet, said Byron, when they were thrown off the roof of WWE headquarters, and they landed on a second roof, and they were fine. In fact, they were so fine that they wrestled on this show.
Baron Corbin didn't know that he was not killing them. So he's supposed to have heat on him for attempted murder, and just so happened that they were, good enough that they even did a tag match and they weren't like taped up and not even like necessarily selling anything.
Dude, not only that, but like the first question that Rey Mysterio was asked later in the show was, "How do you feel?" And he says, "Charlie, I feel great." He feels great after nearly dying. So the Becky segment, she comes.
He did admit that he had a near-death experience mentally.
He did see his life flash before his eyes. Yes. So Becky comes out. She's in tears. This is no ordinary night for her, torn between joy and sadness. At a point in life where things are about to change, she needs to do something about it. She explains that she told the decision makers to raise the stakes, and they did. Talked about how she walked through these doors in 2013, claims she did not know anyone in this country in 2013, but that is not correct. I saw her wrestling in a garage around here, years before that.
She's been in the country for years and years. I wonder why she said that.
I don't know. It was kind of weird.
Maybe could it be that when she went there, she didn't know anyone in the company?
Well,
but even then, she would have bumped into some people, right?
I would think so.
She was in this country for years. So that wouldn't even be right either.
So she said she didn't know if anybody would care about her, but they did. The fans got behind her, and the fans therefore deserve to hear this first before anybody else. So Asuka's music hits.
It wasn't exactly before anybody else. I think that she probably told the company, you know what I mean?
You'd think so. Asuka's music hits.
I don't really think the fans were the first to know.
She runs down to the ring, freaking out, all angry, and Becky says, "Listen, you beat me when nobody else could. You've been the best wrestler in the world for a long time. I'm glad this is happening to you." Says last night wasn't just for the briefcase, but it was for this. And she opens up the briefcase. The woman's title is in it. And she says, "I can't fight anymore, but you can. You are the champion." So Asuka celebrates. She runs around. She's all excited. Comes back to the ring. And Becky says, "You go and be a warrior, because I'm going to go and be a mother." And she starts crying. Asuka starts crying. They're hugging each other. They're so happy. Asuka leads a Becky chant. Becky's crying. This was awesome. Just a great deal. And then they go backstage, and Charlie's going to interview Becky, but all of the baby faces, no heels I might add, all the baby faces come up, and they hug her, they congratulate her, and they talk about how she's in the club now, she's a parent. It was just great. This was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
We had
It was really cool.
We had Lashley and Humberto Carrillo no DQ match, and they just... Actually, Lashley sold a ton for this guy, and Humberto ran wild. It's no DQ. He's hitting him with chairs. Lashley finally sends him into the post, but Carrillo makes a comeback, hits him with more chair shots, and finally he goes for a springboard, and Lashley catches him in the full Nelson and gets the submission. It was good while it lasted.
It was fine. They really put Lashley over strong. I got the impression that from watching it that McIntyre and Lashley is perhaps the next pay-per-view match. But
they're absolutely going that direction.
Yeah.
So then they announced that the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders are going to be playing baseball later because the Viking Raiders, basketball, Viking Raiders were on Twitter all weekend saying that anything the Street Profits could do, they could do better. And so the Street Profits challenged them to a basketball game. Eric is outraged they didn't challenge them to something cool like sword fighting, and that would come later on in the show.
Does that mean that we're going to get sword fighting next week?
I don't think we're going to get sword fighting, but I mean, I mean, technically, it should keep being things that the Street Profits are challenging them to do, but then they beat them at them. That should be the story, leading to Street Profits finally defeating them.
Yeah, in the championship match at some point.
Charlie's with Asuka, who's all excited. Kyrie shows up. They start celebrating. We have an Edge Norton video package. Apollo Crews recap. By the way, it's been 2 weeks, and they have no update on what happened to Apollo Crews' knee.
Yeah, other things are occupying their brains right now. So, they have to figure out if... Okay, so... Because originally, it looked like Apollo Crews was going to end up with MVP, but if Bobby Lashley ends up with MVP, then maybe Apollo Crews doesn't end up with MVP.
So for some reason, I feel like I've missed a month of shows. Angel Garza and Austin Theory are now screaming at each other backstage. They're having...
Well, they're all three are now like feuding. I think this. You didn't miss anything. It's just like I think it's just fun. They did do stuff where they didn't. Wasn't it Andrade that they didn't save when she ordered them to? But whatever it is, they're just starting to deal where those two don't like each other. So I guess it's something to do, Garza against Theory. But it's something to do. I think that looks like the direction.
So then, just to fuck with me, we've got Angel Garza versus Tozawa. And Angel Garza squashes Tozawa. Extended squash, by the way. He just beats him. He goes for the wing clipper. And, he beat him so thoroughly for so long that I thought, oh, my God, they're actually going to do the fluke and Tozawa's going to win. But no, he sets up for the wing clipper, and he hits it, and he wins. So, Tozawa now 0-8 in the year 2020 on Raw. And he is 2-0 on NXT.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, it's like he should that's just bad. It's bad booking. I mean, on many levels.
So Garza and Theory are still yelling at each other. McIntyre shows up, challenges them to a fight. He lays out Theory with the Claymore kick. Andrade and Angel just start laughing, and then Drew lays out Angel, and Drew and Andrade scream at each other. They play Drew's music. They come back for commercial, and in fact, we have champion versus champion, Drew McIntyre versus Andrade. And Andrade worked over his arm. Drew made his big comeback. The big spot was Andrade hit the double knees in the corner, but Drew kicked out at 1. Andrade then tried a springboard, reverse Hurricane Rana. Drew gave him the reverse Alabama Slam, Claymore kick, and got the pin. This is when he revealed, I guess he's the GM now, that there is a brand-to-brand invitation. And he has extended an invitation to SmackDown, and Baron Corbin accepted, and he will Claymore him next week.
Well, it's funny because he said it was somebody that he had hung around with, and he also said that it's somebody he doesn't like, but it's also somebody that nobody else likes either. So that was kind of funny.
No one in the world likes him, he said. MVP and Lashley...
I don't know if no one in the world likes him, but I think that if you had a popularity thing of the number of people who like him, it wouldn't be a giant number.
I think you're probably right. MVP and Lashley are having the discussion, and MVP says you need to stay angry and stay focused. That full Nelson is awesome, but listen, why are you fighting a guy like Humberto Carrillo when you got fools from SmackDown that are fighting for the title here on this show? When's the last time you fought for the title, he said. You don't remember? I do. It was 2007. 2007, I was just starting out here.
That was a long time ago.
Says it's 13 years later and you're in the same damn location. When is Lashley going to let Lashley out? And he says he's going to go get ready for his match. He passes Lana. He says, if Lashley's looking for a way out, tell him to come find me. She flips her lid. She's screaming like a crazy person. So, looks like Lashley's on his way to a title match.
Mm-hmm.
We have an Alexa and Nikki segment, and they're just all excited about the man becoming the mom. They wish you a belated Happy Mother's Day, and who should return to be inserted into a feud for the tag team titles but the Iconics. They return, they make some baby jokes, they challenge for the tag team titles tonight. Nikki and Alexa don't want a title match, even though they're baby faces. Alexa says you don't just waltz in here and demand a title match. So Bayley says, fine, just have a match with us. It's a very easy negotiation. So we have a non-title match, and I was expecting a gigantic disaster, but it was okay. And
the match was fine.
The Iconics, they looked like they felt like they had something to prove because they worked harder than I think they've worked since the day they called up to the main roster. And they ran wild.
I didn't see them working harder, but they worked better. I mean, I never sensed them as lazy. They just had lots of timing issues in this match.
Dude, I saw some matches where it looked like they were just going through the motions, doing their gimmick. I mean, they were way better tonight.
Yeah, they were way better, but it was because the timing was better. It was because they would do moves before and the moves would miss, or the moves would be off, like sometimes really bad. And this one, so it's a credit. Either they've worked on their timing, or they work real well with Bliss and Cross and that. But it wasn't. I didn't look. It's not like they worked harder. They just didn't botch anything, and they didn't miss time stuff. They weren't. And that was really the problem, is you used to watch them, and their stuff didn't. Their stuff didn't look good, and in this match, their stuff looked good.
Alexa ran wild. Iconics sent Nikki outside, and then they double team Alexa and pin her. Very important note.
The deal is that Billy Kay hit her in the throat. So I guess one of the things they're trying to get over on the shows is that the throat and the eyes are vulnerable, which, I guess in real life they are. That was, because it was like this thrust to the throat, and they were acting like it was an illegal, vicious maneuver, and beat her, essentially beat her with it. Although they they did try a magic killer, and it didn't look like a magic killer. It looked like an attempt at a magic killer. So that move was not so pretty.
Then Charlie is with Ray for the funniest interview. Ray says, I feel great today, but going into last night's match, I kept hyping myself up, saying the risk is worth the reward. The risk is worth the reward. I'll be the first to admit I saw my life flash before my eyes when Corbin tossed me off the roof, but a miracle happened. 10 seconds after I was thrown off the roof, I landed on a second roof 6 feet down. 2 seconds, he says. Got to get the timing right for the physicists out there. But he says it was too late. He congratulates Otis. I tried my best, he says. I just couldn't get the job done. All of a sudden, up walks, I guess it's Seth Rollins. His hair's all disheveled. He's, not sucking in his gut. He's just trying to look as homeless as possible. And he just stares at Ray. And Ray says, may the best team win tonight in our match. And by the way, congratulations. Being a father, Seth, it truly changes your life. I am genuinely happy for you and Becky. And Seth just stares at him, and then he just rambles off. And Ray can't even believe his eyes, and he unhooks his mask, and he just whispers, what a dick. I laughed so hard. This was great.
That was interesting. Yeah.
MVP and Shane Thorne and Brendan Vink versus Truth, Cedric, and Ricochet. If you want to know how far Cedric and Ricochet have fallen, they did a 6-man tag here. Truth got the win while he was playing Pretty Ricky, and his teeth fell out. And afterwards, Lashley came out and speared Truth to death, put him in the full Nelson, and laid him out with his kick. I have no idea where Cedric and Ricochet went. They just disappeared off the face of the earth. And that was the match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, pretty much of a nothing match. I mean, the one thing about it was last week it looked like they were trying to do something with Brendan Vink and Shane Thorne, and this week it was like, okay, they're really not trying to do something with them either. It was just, because this was all
well,
about
Dave, it's
really,
been 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It is amazing how that happens. Jinder Mahal promo, honored to be back on Raw. Been a long 10 months.
Yeah, just total babyface promo.
Well, yeah, I guess he's elated to see Drew prosper. Former champion deserves to be loved and respected, just like Drew, on a new journey. And this time he says it will be a hero's journey. So he's either a babyface or he's a full of shit heel. I can't decide.
Yeah, I thought, he came across like trying to be a babyface, which would be tough. We'll see how it goes. I mean, yeah, I think the idea is they want a babyface from India, and he's the guy.
You know what's funny about that? When they gave him that title run 2 years ago or whatever, I asked the same question. If you want to create a star for the Indian market, why in God's name is he a heel? Why?
But the thing is that he was a babyface for India. I mean, every promo was the Bret Hart thing. Every promo was, him, just babyfacing for India and not caring about the United States. And I think the deal is maybe they thought that because
well, it didn't work.
Well, but we don't know if it worked or didn't work for India. I guess it didn't, in the sense that he didn't make a marketable difference as far as when they went there. Did it sell more tickets than they had before? No, not at all. Was there any big, increase in network subscriptions in India? Not in the least. So, yeah, it didn't. So maybe this time they're going to do it where, well, we can't have him do heel things while kissing up to India. Let's just have him actually be a babyface this time for India. So, yeah, it's an attempt. It's something. It's something different. I don't know about him being a babyface in the United States, though, because he was doing. It was a very. I don't know. He doesn't really seem to have great babyface potential to me. But we'll see. Maybe he'll.
Well, unfortunately, he also didn't seem to have great heel potential, because that did not work out one bit when he was champion.
Well, people didn't like him, but he was pushed way above his level. As a babyface, we have to watch the push, because as a babyface, I don't see his level being that high either, at all. But, we'll see.
We have a Shayna promo. She says, how stupid do you have to be to get knocked up when you're the champion? 10 out of 10 mothers will try to convince you pregnancy did not ruin their careers. Becky was the longest reigning champion, threw it all away to house some miserable parasite. Imagine the man barefoot and fat on the couch eating bonbons. That kid is going to suck, she says. You know who the father is? I rest my case. We had AJ backstage eating popcorn, freaks out at the Undertaker Last Ride promo. When I saw this, I thought, you know what? Maybe that wasn't his last match, and he wants to have like a traditional in-ring match with AJ Styles, because they keep going with this.
Yeah, I think that I got the impression of the same thing, that's the direction for way down the line.
Yeah. Becky is with Vince, but there's no audio. That was weird. And then we had Ray and Alistair versus Buddy and Seth. So Seth is out there, his hair's all disheveled, gear all messed up, boots untied, just standing on the apron. Buddy has to work the match all by himself. It's 2-on-1, advantage baby faces. Buddy still manages to get the heat. He's just beating on Aleister Black for a while. And then Black gets the hot tag. Ray runs wild. Ray ends up booting. He hits a knee on Seth, and Seth falls off the apron. Ray then goes for the 619, but Seth Rollins, who is in the match, grabs him mid-move, and the ref calls for a disqualification. What?
Mm-hmm. Yep. What can I say?
Dude, the Iconics beat Alexa with a double-team move, and Seth can't grab Ray or it's a disqualification? This was the dumbest finish I've ever seen. So Seth...
It was a extremely weak DQ, even by WWE standards. But, I mean, the idea is that that they were looking for a way out, and that was the way they chose. They didn't want to beat anyone, so... They figure, I guess, with Seth injuring Ray, that they didn't need to have a win. They could just get out of the match. And the important thing is the angle that comes next.
Well, I know this is a good 13, 15 seconds I had to think, but how about he grabs the guy's legs and he drags him outside, and Buddy takes out Alistair, and Seth gouges Ray's eyes in the corner of the goddamn steps, and that's your DQ, and that's your angle.
Yep, you could do that too. I mean, and they could execute it not so, but I don't know. I mean, sometimes they'd let things go, and sometimes they have DQs for virtually nothing.
Well, he gouged his eye on the corner of the steps, and then the guys came out, and Ray's blind, and there's blood, and they take him backstage. They go to commercial, they come back, they're working on his eye, he's got his mask off. Aleister Black is back there with him, and Seth and Buddy walk in, and Seth Rollins, who just gouged his eyeball out in the corner of the steps, Seth says, "I don't know what happened out there." And Aleister's all mad, and Buddy tries to hold Aleister back, so Aleister beats up Buddy, and Seth just vanishes into the night. So, I guess, I don't know what's going on here. This was an idea, but there was a lot wrong with it.
Yeah.
By the way, the Street Profits Viking Raiders in a basketball challenge. So the Viking Raiders, who have done carpool karaoke and were tweeting all weekend, they have no idea how to play basketball, allegedly. And
allegedly.
Yes, they do the basketball game. The Profits just destroy them. It's 74-0. And then with seconds left, Eric managed to get one shot. They think they've won. The Street Profits explain to them, it's 74-2, and you lost. They go to Natty. She's yelling at Shayna for...
Oh, you missed. You missed what happened after.
No, that's after this interview. First, Natty yells at Shayna for disrespecting motherhood, vows to teach her a lesson here tonight. Shayna says, "You know nothing about motherhood. You're never going to have a kid. The Hart Dynasty dies with you." Then they go back to the basketball game, and they're shaking hands, and Eric says, "You know, we let you win." And the Street Profits laugh, and he says, "Show him, Ivar." And Ivar sinks a bunch of three-pointers.
People like take dives in basketball games, too?
I guess so. And Ivar sinks a bunch of three-pointers, and they laugh, and Eric says, "We told you, anything you can do, we can do better." And then Ivar runs, and they do the most wacky shot of him dunking a basketball, clearly off a trampoline, but they don't show you the trampoline. It's very wacky, but I guess in WWE storyline, the Viking Raiders beat the Street Profits at basketball. Shayna versus Natty.
I don't know about that, but it was weird because it was like they had a message, but then they just ended up with. I'm not even sure. It was really hard to figure out what like the goal of this is, other than somebody just had some ideas that don't seem to.
Well, the goal is that, in fact, the Viking Raiders have beaten Street Profits at wrestling and now at basketball. And they'll probably do a few more of them.
They lost 74-2.
Well, yeah, but I mean, don't think about it too much. They proved that they were better at basketball after taking a dive in a basketball game. Yes.
Yeah, it was weird.
So Shayna faces Natty, and I actually really liked this match. It didn't go a long time, but it was a very different style match. They kind of did it shoot style. It was like shoot WWE style, if there is such a thing.
It was more chain wrestling than shoot wrestling.
Shayna threatened
it was just kind of typical of what technical pro wrestling. But I mean, Natty's good at that, and it's probably something that it's an easy match for Shayna to do it, because with Shayna, if there's like lots of movement and high spots, she's not the best at it. But when it's actual wrestling, she's very good at it.
Shayna threatened to break the arm, but Natty moved, tried to roll up. Shayna stood up, hit the hard knee strike, got the pin, and then Natty pitched a fit in the ring afterwards. We had a Corbin promo, nothing to talk about here. He just talked about throwing the dudes off the roof, and he's gonna win the title or whatever. And then finally, the main event was the Edge promo.
I think that's a non-title match.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Edge came out for a promo, and he said, "First time I've been here in 6 weeks. Last time I was here was WrestleMania, my first WrestleMania in 9 years." He says, "WrestleMania is not the end for me. If you watched Raw last week, there was a promo video saying I was coming here to hunt the Viper. They never talked to me about that. I got my closure at WrestleMania." Just buries the production crew. He says, "I'm ready to move on." Orton interrupts, and he says, "Listen, long story short, at the Royal Rumble, you made a return. You had 29 guys to hide behind. You beat me in a match where you squished my head between two chairs, but you know what? You never beat me in a wrestling match. And he says, "You haven't wrestled since 2011. I don't think you've got it in you anymore. I know that look. There's doubt in your eyes. You got grit, passion, but you can't knock off the ring rust. Your passion can't help you now. You once went on record saying I was the best ever to lace up a pair of wrestling boots, a future Hall of Famer. I think this story writes itself. If you've got the guts at Backlash, it'll be me and you in a straight-up wrestling match." And Edge just stands there, and Charlie gets in the ring and says, "Edge, do you have a response?" And he doesn't say anything, and so the show ends with Charlie Caruso saying, and I quote, "Well, gentlemen, if this does happen, it just may be the greatest wrestling match ever." And the show goes off the air. I was like, what? They're going to have the greatest wrestling match ever, Dave. Ever. 8 stars. That was how it ended. So there you go.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Hey, listen, I'll say this. As wacky as it is to go from a last man standing match first to a regular match second, Randy Orton did a hell of a job making that make sense. So I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah, they did. They actually did, rather than just do it like is usually done, where it's like, this doesn't make sense. They actually explained why it made sense, so it was okay. It was good. So obviously that's going to be at the next pay-per-view, one of the key matches on it. And I'm sure they'll have a really good match because Edge is into good matches, and I think probably feels he needs to prove something.
They're both into good matches.
Randy Orton?
No, I mean, he tries. He just has his style.
Randy Orton's just kind of into going through and, just going through. I mean, he's not into bad matches, but it's just like he's just kind of there. He's a talent for sure. But I mean, for a guy with the talent he has, he's had an inordinately few great matches. I mean, I don't think that there's ever been a guy so talented that I've ever seen who really doesn't have great matches. He has good matches and average matches, and on occasion, very good matches, but not too many great matches at all.
So they also have announced that on Friday's SmackDown, besides Charlotte appearing, there will be word on what's happening with the Intercontinental Title. Because I guess Sami Zayn ain't going to be showing up for a while, and he's the champion, so they're going to make a ruling.
Yep. So there you go.
That sounds to me like he's being stripped of this title.
Oh, yeah. I think the basic gist is that either he comes to TV or he gets stripped of the title, yeah. So I guess that stuff about, well, it's voluntary.
Sure.
That, it also, unlike with all the other companies where they go like, this is voluntary and it will not affect your position on the card or your future bookings, with WWE, where in fact they said the same thing, they had their hands crossed or whatever, his fingers crossed when they said it didn't really, it's secret. It secretly wasn't the case. Because
that Intercontinental title is so valuable to SmackDown television.
Yeah. To me, you know what, when it comes to this, I think it doesn't matter because the Intercontinental title really doesn't mean anything. But I think just from the optics of the situation, you really shouldn't take a title from someone for that reason. So, and like again, Adam Page hasn't been on AEW, and he's still the champ. Tessa Blanchard wasn't in Impact, nor was the North. Although the North did send in, footage and everything like that. But Tessa stayed home, and I thought they might strip her of the title, and they did not do that. They're just doing a tournament for the number one contender position.
All right, so we got a lot of shows coming up. This Wednesday, we have AEW, NXT, and UFC. What do we have on these wrestling shows?
The NXT's Cameron Grimes and Finn Balor and Matt Riddle and Matt Riddle and Timothy Thatcher defending the tag team titles against Fabian Aichner and Marcel Bartel. So that, to me, sounds like a show that will go down from last week. Actually, I think they both do sound like they will go down. And then also the fact that UFC is, going head to head. Now, UFC will not be on television; only be on ESPN Plus. So I don't know how much damage it would do to the other two shows. I mean, probably a very small amount. So I think the combination of things, the shows will maybe down a little bit. Maybe AEW, because the last week's show was so good, maybe it won't drop. I mean, I don't know. By the way, UFC did 700,000 buys on Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah, real big number.
So you did get a number.
It was commensurate with the number of Google searches. It pretty much fits where that came in, because it was a high John Jones number, and 700,000 is exactly that, a high John Jones number. I expect the TV rating to be very strong. That'll come out tomorrow.
Well, for the Wednesday show, we got Anthony Smith, Glover Teixeira, Ben Rothwell, Ovin St. Preux, Alexander Hernandez, Drew Dober, Ricky Simon, Ray Borg, and Carl Roberson, and Marvin Vittori.
Yeah. Some of those fights are good, but marquee value, not much on this show.
And for the AW show, there's MJF Wrestling, Jericho versus Pineapple Pete, Brody Lee versus Chris Daniels, and what was the last one?
Trying to think. What is the other one? There's can't remember off the man.
I'll find him here. Stand by. Let's see.
Oh, Jurassic
Express Best Friends. Interview with Jake Roberts and Murder Hawk, and the four-way Sheeta, Penelope, Britt, and Statlander.
For the women's title shot on the pay-per-view, most likely. They didn't announce that, but that's probably what it's there for. And then the Best Friends is just a way to, get Orange Cassidy on the air, because people are into Orange Cassidy. And even though they are, some people are in denial and think that it's weird, because it's like even though his numbers have been really good, people think that he's turning off the casual fans, and it's like, even if I didn't know that's not the case, the numbers tell you. That's the one thing. It's like, you can learn, but it's weird. Some people just refuse to learn. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, the numbers are up. That's good. No, it's not. It's ruining wrestling. He's running off fans. It's like, but the numbers are up. It's like, but he's running off fans. And it's like, he's not, if he was running off fans, I would tell you, this guy, because when he came in, I didn't know if it was going to work on TV. But if he was running off numbers, I would tell you, this guy is running off audience, and you get him off TV. But the reality is that, and again, maybe it's a short-term thing, maybe it's not. But right now it's working, so right now they're going to have the dude on TV.
Tell us about Roman Reigns.
Okay, well, Roman Reigns, so the situation, because, all forms of, there's different forms of leukemia. And we've talked a little bit about, the fact that if you have leukemia, your risk, it's on the CDC list of the factors, it's like previous cancers, particularly lymphoma and leukemia, are higher risk factors for coronavirus, along with obesity, diabetes. There's others as well, but it's right there on the top of the list. But the thing with the previous cancer and leukemia is that in a lot of forms of leukemia and lymphoma, the way and other cancers, the way you fight it is with what's it called?
Immunosuppressants?
Chemotherapy and radiation. And chemotherapy and radiation are screwed for your immune system. It's very bad. So that really hurts your situation. Now, with the form of leukemia that Roman Reigns had, which is of the forms of leukemia, it is the lowest death rate of all the forms. I mean, the negative of it is that it will probably come back. It comes back. It's not curable, but it's you can still, you can still die from it. It's not like it's anything good, but of all the forms, it's the best one to have. And when it comes to this, it's even better because he didn't need, he did not have chemotherapy as his treatment, and because of that, his immune system is not as bad as an immune system would be normally for someone who has had cancer. So now it's like a lower high risk. Okay, before I would say he's a high risk, and he's still a risk, and it's probably not a good idea for him to come in and do these shows, and he's not right now. I don't know what, and again, everyone's going to make a choice. Realistically, the WWE doctor should not allow him to make the choice and should just say no, because it's like, I think that he was trying to say that, like, his immune system's not compromised, and it's not as compromised as a normal person who's had cancer, but it's still, it's still not 100% or anything. It's still not going to be 100%. It's still going to be a risk. So, anyway, just kind of like, his situation, the form of leukemia at CML leukemia is not. Again, we don't know everything. This disease is kind of new, but what the theory is regarding why your immune system gets destroyed when you've had cancer, a lot of it is the chemotherapy and radiation, and since he did not have those two treatments, it's not as bad. So when he was talking about how his immune system isn't bad, it's probably not as bad as a usual, It's like I read that and it was kind of like, nah, cancer is terrible for your immune system. It's awful. But I asked about this and it's like, it's not good, but if you just say leukemia, they'll say like, oh my God, it's terrible for you. But CML leukemia, it's not as bad because of the nature of how you fight it.
Let's jump into the mailbag.
But it is not good.
Mailbag at
Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, mailbag at WrestlingObserver.com here. This person wants to know what you can tell us about Scott Casey.
Which Scott Casey?
He just wrote, what can Dave tell us about Scott Casey?
This is probably Scott Casey, the Southwest champion, the guy who was wrestled out of San Antonio for years and years and years. I think he was defensive back at West Texas State, football player. And, he was a guy, I remember when he started in San Antonio, because we got the TV from San Antonio in San Jose for a while, and he was just starting out in the, I'm going to say around 74, 75, and, for Joe Blanchard's group, and all they kept doing was putting him over as handsome young Scott Casey, coming out of college and everything, and, he's kind of like, big ladies man type of guy, and he was, in fact, that, and, as a wrestler, he was okay. Nothing special at all. And, mostly wrestled in Texas, mostly San Antonio, sometimes in Dallas, mid-level push, usually. If talent was low, maybe a higher level push. And then when the territories died, he did have a WWE run for a little while. He was there for a while. I remember, I believe, one of his, it may have been his last match was in either San Francisco or Oakland. I could be wrong about this, but I remember going to a show in either San Francisco or Oakland, and he wrestled Owen Hart, and afterwards it was kind of like, I remember, it's like, I'm done. And it's like, I just didn't expect that. It's like, I'm done, So he may have been done 2 weeks later, but that was it. I don't know if it was his choice or their choice. I guess it was probably his choice because it was he didn't say they fired me. It's just sort of like, I'm done. He was just used as an enhancement guy, and I guess whatever. He was probably making good money. Not good, but yeah. Enhancement guys in WWE that were booked solid. Because he was a solid enough guy to lose to people. A little bit of a name and everything like that. So he probably was doing fairly well, but whatever, maybe just didn't like to travel, or he was older by then. I'm going to guess he was by that point. Whatever, late 30s, early 40s. So just wanted to go home, and that was kind of it. He was. That was kind of the deal. He worked in Dallas for, at times too. Probably worked some other territories as well.
First here says, does Dave have any insight as to why Magnum TA never did color commentary after 1989? I recently watched the Chi-Town Rumble, and he was great.
They just chose, they tried to use him in different ways, and it just didn't stick. It's just a corporate decision. I thought, he's a good talker, but, that was a thing. And he got into other businesses later anyway, and actually did very well in business away from wrestling. But it was just the company just felt they did not feel he was a great announcer, because if they did, they would have kept him as an announcer.
I remember there was that period for like 3 years or whatever after the accident, or maybe it was a little bit less than that, but they had him doing all sorts of different things. Like he had commentary, he had the talk show segment that he did. Everything that he did, I thought, he's very good at this. But it was like you would see him and then you wouldn't see him for a long time.
I don't think he was a really good talker, but I think that it would be like the segments themselves. I think that they just kind of didn't feel that those segments were effective. And then as an announcer, I thought that he was fairly good, but maybe they just thought other people were better. I just remember it wasn't. They didn't rave about him or anything like that, and he kind of had a little bit, because he was all messed up from that car accident, and because he was a big star. They were kind of trying to give him something to make him effective on the thing, but one of those things that was in the talk show segments. Those things, generally speaking, were stuff that you would do for a while, and they'd sort of run their course, and then you just move on. So there's not a lot of longevity. He had a lot of roles that did not have a lot of longevity, because they traditionally were not roles that you would have longevity in, and that's kind of what happened.
This person here says, why weren't cage matches done in All Japan and New Japan in the Baba Inoki era? Were the ones in IWE considered a big deal by their fans?
Yeah, it was their calling card, because they were the ones that did cage matches. IWE, when Rusher Kimura, the king of the cage matches and everything. Baba, it just wasn't in the mentality. New Japan had a couple of cage matches, but very, very rare. It just was not in the mentality of where they came from, because I don't think Ricky Dozan ever had cage matches either. And JWA, I don't remember them having cage matches. They might have had one or two, but I don't particularly remember any. And that's that was the upbringing that Baba and Inoki had. And, Inoki had his type of matches, and Baba didn't really do gimmick matches. They just didn't do it. That's just how All Japan was.
All right, everybody. On that note, we're going to wrap it up for today. The back issue of The Observer is up on the front page. The New Observer, Thursday or Friday this week, I believe, is the plan. Right, Dave?
Yeah, I would think I'll have it done by Thursday night, but, I'm out of town, so it might. And there's a lot of writing to do, and I think there's going to be a lot of news, and got to still study up on this, everybody's still doing shows, because it's UFC, to their credit, UFC did probably the best job they could do, and the thing that fell through the cracks was something that they didn't think of, and they're trying to rectify that now. But there still is a big question whether, no matter what you do, is it really safe enough? And, for all the reasons that have been said a million times. So I guess with Joe Rogan, the deal with Joe Rogan was, he was mad that the announcers weren't sitting together because we all tested negative. And he put up a fit on why, they were going to do that. That's the way they were going to do the interviews. And it's not so much that he believes the virus isn't real, but it's like he doesn't get the testing. He just doesn't get it. That just because you test negative doesn't mean nobody has it nor they're contagious. It just means it didn't show up yet. Or it doesn't necessarily mean anything, a negative test. I mean, it's probably if you have a negative test, you probably don't have it, but it's not an assurance. And the whole reason that they do all these things, the masks on people, because aside from those three guys, Jacques Ray Souza and his two coaches, everybody else tested negative. So if you look at it that way, then nobody needs masks and everyone can be there and it's not a dangerous situation. But in reality, that is just not the case because this testing, the testing is not foolproof, but Joe didn't understand that. They were trying to, it's another example in this case of the company trying to make things as safe as possible and guys that don't get it getting mad about it.
So, all of that in The Observer coming up, everybody. And check out the front page for more. Lots of shows and stories. And that's it. We'll talk to you again after a while.